The novel, Katabasis, follows two rival PhD students, Alice Law and Peter Murdoch, who are so desperate for a letter recommendation from their recently departed thesis advisor, Professor Jacob Grimes, that they choose to descend into hell to retrieve his soul. Grimes died in a magical accident that Alice believes was her fault. Hell appears to them as a university campus. As Alice and Peter traverse the 8 courts of hell, they face various trials that mirror academic pressures and are forced to confront the fraught rivalry between them. They uncover the truth about Grimes' manipulative cruelty, including emotional and sexual abuse, realizing he pitted them against each other. Peter sacrifices his life for Alice to escape a trap. Alice continues alone to the final court, eventually realizing Grimes is a weak, ordinary man.
Welcome back, side questers. We are about to go to hell.
We're there already.
Literally. We are there already. As you might recall from last time, we were reading through Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which had spooky spirits and ghosts. But that's because Dickens wrote about a man who is an old curmudgeon. So, whatever. But for us, we're descending into hell with Katabasis by R.F. Kuang.
Yeah, I've heard it pronounced so many different ways on the reviews that I watched. If I remember my Greek studies correctly, it's Katabases. It's how it would have been pronounced in Greek, Katabases. But we'll probably pronounce it 4 different ways on this podcast because that's how everybody else pronounces it. I've heard it Katabasis. I've heard it the way you just said it. Anyway, just a quick aside. But
sure.
It means descent.
That was my follow-up. Descent.
It means descent. Yep.
Great. That is what I wanted. All right, let's keep moving. We're going to roll through the whole book in one episode because next episode we're going to have 2 lovely ladies join us back as guests. You know both of them. Neither of them is a new guest. We're going to have Jess back on with her wild opinions, and we're going to have Abby back on as someone who actually has read a lot of R.F. Kuang's books, and she'll be coming in as our resident expert. So can't wait to have them on. But I'm going to start off with a quick bio about the author herself. Rebecca F. Kuang is the #1 New York Times and #1 Sunday Times best-selling author of Poppy War, the trilogy, Babel, An Arcane History, Yellowface, and Katabasis. Her work has won the Nebula, Locus, Crawford, and British Book Awards. She was named to the 2023 Time 100 Next list and the Forbes 30 Under 30 class of 2024. A Marshall Scholar, she has an MPhil in Chinese Studies from Cambridge and an MSc, which you'll tell me what that is in a second, Slava, in Contemporary Chinese Studies from Oxford. She is now pursuing a PhD in East Asian languages and literatures at Yale. She's very well educated. Crazy. Where she researches Sinophone literature and Asian American literature. I'm actually going to have to look up what Sinophone literature is because I knew the rest of the stuff. But yeah. What is the MSc? Master's in Science?
Science. It's a Master's in Science.
Okay.
It's often associated with STEM, I think.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but an MS is a Master of Science. An MSc, I think, might be just something that's very specialized. So, computer science, maybe?
All right. Well, that is our author. R.F. Kuang pulls no punches in terms of writing academia and easily referencing, it sounds like, her alma mater here, and lets us know what it's like to live amongst the pressures of being a grad student in those places. Now, Slav and I have some hot takes in terms of like character development for this book in particular, but we'll get into that shortly. I did do a quick search here. Sinophone literature refers to literary works written in Chinese or by Chinese-speaking authors outside of mainland China.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is, I mean, you and I would not normally know that, right? Like,
No.
barring research.
Yeah.
Sino is Chinese, and phone is speaking or writing in a particular language. So Sinophone is Chinese speaking, apparently.
All right.
Language specifically, not nationality. So if you spoke Chinese and then wrote Chinese literature because you're a Chinese speaker outside of mainland China, you could be writing Sinophone literature.
Okay.
So, fun little facts there about a new literature type that I didn't know about. If you knew about it in the audience, drop it in the comments. Also, on this line, what other very unique genres of literature do you know about that most people don't? I want to know about those. So, put them in the comments for me. Slava, can you lead us down into the descent of Katabasis?
I certainly can. So we're going to do a quick plot summary here, and full spoilers ahead. Because we're covering the whole book in one episode, it is going to be the whole plot given to you. So here we go. The novel Katabasis. Just a quick warning: full spoilers ahead. Because we're covering the whole book in one episode, I'm going to give the major plot points, and some of them are going to be spoilers. The novel, Katabases, follows two rival PhD students, Alice Law and Peter Murdoch, who are so desperate for a letter recommendation from their recently departed thesis advisor, Professor Jacob Grimes, that they choose to descend into hell to retrieve his soul. Of note, Grimes died in a magical accident that Alice believes was her fault. Hell appears to them as a university campus. Can relate. Which reflects the theme of academia as an infernal structure. As Alice and Peter traverse the 8 courts of hell, they face various trials that mirror academic pressures and are forced to confront the fraught rivalry between them. They uncover the truth about Grimes' manipulative cruelty, including emotional and sexual abuse, realizing he pitted them against each other. Peter sacrifices his life for Alice to escape a trap set by the antagonistic magicians called the Crypt. Alice continues alone to the final court, eventually realizing Grimes is a weak, ordinary man. She confronts Lord Yama, the king of the underworld, and uses a true contradiction, Lethe, to exchange Grimes' soul for Peter's return. The pair secures the return of half their sacrificed lifespans and ascends back to the surface, free from the toxic ambitions of academia. That's a pretty good summary of what we read.
It is. Cutting to the chase, what is your response when Lord Yama's like, yeah, I'll let you go back, but I'm going to take half your lifespan?
Well, he only took a quarter of their lifespan. They gave up half of their lifespan to go to hell, and he gives half of that back to them. But I think that's fine. Believable. I accept it. He was even generous. The fact to go to hell, you have to give something up to traverse it as a person who's alive makes sense to me. The fact that Yama is generous, if you want to call him that, and says, all right, you still have to pay a price, but because of all you endured, I'm giving you half of your payment back. So they only took off a quarter of their life in the end. That seems pretty good.
And if they're grad students, they're probably, like late 20s, you think?
Mid to late 20s if they went from school to school to school, yep.
Yeah, straight back to back to back.
Yep.
So if he took a quarter of their life, they're going to die. Let's say they lived, average person, lives to 100, right? Give or take? So
I would say 80, but sure, 100.
Okay. If you're going to call it, if it's 80, then they've got 30 years left, maybe.
Yeah.
So, man, do they really want to dedicate all their time to school? I don't know.
Not after that.
Not after that, man.
Yeah.
But when we got into this book, you and I both said, man, I really like the concept. I like the idea of it, right?
Yep.
I like the potential it has. but we also brought up the fact that the main character, Alice, she feels as though when I'm experiencing what she's experiencing, it seems as though she's actually like a homeschooler who's hit college for the first time, like undergrad, not
Yeah.
grad school, right?
Yep.
And the reason that you and I talked about, and you can expand on this here in a second for me, is some of the stuff she comments on, like the homeschool part, like feels very normal, but like who gets to grad school and doesn't have some understanding of how the world works, in terms of like coarse joking and romance. Even if you've never had romance yourself of some kind, at least watching a Disney Channel movie or a romantic comedy or something, right? Because there is
Yeah.
some sort of modernity in the book, unless I've totally missed it. It seemed like it was more modern.
No, you haven't missed it. One of the critiques that I watched, and I'll preface what I'm about to say in response to you, is I found two content creators similar to us who have YouTube channels. One of them, she loved the book. She thought it was great. One of them, she hated the book. And then I found a Guardian review and an NPR review and a couple of other blogs. And I specifically searched for very positive and somewhat to very negative reviews of the book. And I'm going to get into that in a second, but the specific response to you is the time period. One of the people who had a negative review of the book, she said that I couldn't figure out what was anachronistic because it seemed out of place, so I judged it as anachronistic. I couldn't tell what time period this is. And that alone, when I heard that, I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. But my initial critique of Alice and Peter was they both seemed, like you said, like a homeschooler seeing the world for the first time. And the thing that cemented that notion and stayed with me to the end of the book is when they sleep next to each other for warmth, and he wakes up with a morning erection, and they both react to it like teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, they have a history, and I get it, the Grimes played with their mind. All that, fair. Yep, that's what happens. But they don't respond to it as adults. And the fact that it's even there, I'm not necessarily judging Kuang for putting in there. As you're writing, an idea comes to you, it's a way to add tension and a little bit of awkwardness there. Great. But the way they deal with it does not fit their age.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they're professionals now, they're in grad school, they're doing this science, which magic in this world is akin to science or adjacent to science. It just didn't seem believable to me.
Right.
So I'm going to give a quick summary of the positive reviews. And like I said, 4 or 5 positive reviews, 4 or 5 negative reviews. I combined what I read and watched into both. So we'll start with the positive reviews. The positive reception of Katabasis underscores its quality as ambitious, smoothly told, deftly written. This is, some of it's my words, some of it's direct quotes, with superb pacing. Reviewers who think this is a great book celebrates the narrative's scathing critique and biting humor. I kind of agree with them. And that it effectively skewers the hypocritical, the insular, and high-pressure environment of prestige academia. The prose, for people who love this, is described as flowing easily, with snappy dialogue, witty narration. Those who laud the novel do so for it finding the perfect balance between goofy and playful and campy, while simultaneously being deep, smart, well-researched, and innovative. Intellectually, they say, the book provides deep level of academic commentary and feeling like the world's most philosophical tongue-in-cheek Easter egg hunt, according to one. Furthermore, Alice's central journey received praise from all the positive reviews as really good character work. One even said some of the best character work in recent history. It provides compelling and realistic protagonist, and reviewers here found the overall experience, again, quotes from the reviews there, it's fun, it's engaging, and it culminates in a satisfying ending focused on the strength of survival. So that is a synopsis of all the positive reviews. And one of the positive reviews from the content creator, she even went into it saying, I am biased. I love R.F. Kuang. I get that there's critiques. Here's my response to those critiques. Now, those who found this book to be a bad piece of literature, here's where their main gripes with it is. So the critique of Katabasis, or Katabasis, see, I'm even mispronouncing it. And
that's why I was just like, Katabasis.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, everybody knows. And it's one of those things where we're not lecturing on Greek literature or Greek grammar, so I'm not going to get spun up about this. But those reviews centered on what they saw as significant flaws. Major editorial and structural issues. Reviewers argued the pacing was glacial and often suffered from repetition and lengthy, distracting philosophical asides that brought the narrative to, quote from one reviewer, a grinding halt. This stagnation resulted in a lack of urgency and, what you mentioned to me in the text, zero stakes,
Yeah.
As the hell depicted was deemed not dangerous. I saw that. That was something that bothered me. And the physical threats dissipated easily. Character development was heavily criticized by a lot of people. Well, a lot of people. The 4 I read. Character development was
6,
heavily
you
criticized.
And me. The 4 you read plus you and me.
Right. So the protagonists were often described as deeply unlikable. Like one reviewer specifically said, I cannot stand Alice. She's greedy, she's immature, and her arc is not earned. And exhibiting zero growth or change.
Okay.
And another one said their arcs for Peter and Alice into narrative dots. Not into narrative, they felt like narrative dots. The promoted academic rivals to lovers dynamic was largely non-existent, which I kind of disagree with, but it probably poorly executed, literally. And they lacked romantic tension, which, again, I also disagree with the negative reviewers on this. There was plenty of tension, but it was executed poorly. It was too awkward for two grown people.
It was just childish. You and I literally both said that if this was set not in grad school, but in undergrad, fine, would have believed it, right? Like, hey, they were homeschooled, they got into Oxford for the first time, like they don't know what's going on, they're kind of like unsure in their own skin. Yeah, honestly, more believable. Sorry, continue.
No, it's fine. So, furthermore, the novel drew negative attention for its lack of internal consistency. That's like the people that see it as a bad book. Why they say it's a bad book? One of the things that repeats in these reviews, there's no internal consistency. Some said the jarring, quick and quippy or quirky and quippy tone takes away from the seriousness of what it tries to accomplish. A lot of people said the starvation disordered eating thing was too poorly executed because it seemed to them that it was glorifying it. I don't agree with that. But ultimately, it was thought as lazy in its imagination. That's how kind of I would put everything together into one sentence. Slava reads all this stuff, all the critiques, and it seemed lazy. And it seemed lazy on two fronts. The editorial front, because a lot of repetition of stuff, and sometimes there would be Grimes' death explained or alluded to, and then alluded to again in one of the reviews that I saw. And they said, like, you said Grimes is dead and Alice thinks she killed him twice in one paragraph. Why are you doing this? So lazy in editorial and lazy in imagination, those are the negative reviews for Katabasis or Katabasis.
You're really committed to trying to say this correctly.
I really am.
I applaud you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're not intellectual enough for it. So I'm gonna help the audience out here. Just you're of course. All right, let's do this. How would you say Katabasis in Russian?
In Russian, with a Russian pronunciation, let me try to think. Katabasis. I don't know. I think you Russian, because it's on that side of the globe.
Yeah.
They would probably try to pronounce it in what academics today think Greek sounded like. So, yeah. Katabasis. Katabasis. That's how they would say it. Katabasis.
All right.
Yep.
Stick with that one.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, what do you guys think? Drop some notes in the comments. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Have you read her before? Right? Is this her best work? I don't know. I want to take a quick interlude before we dive into more of the plot here. And just one thing I really want to praise her on is the sheer attention to detail here in this hardcover book. Slava, do you remember what it's called to color the outsides of the pages?
I do not.
But it's beautiful. Shiny gold on the front of the cover. This was great. I love this. If I saw this in the shop, I would just buy this because very cool. A lot of attention to detail on all of it, where it's these spirits and they're kind of waves, and then a sort of heaven and hell type thing here with skulls and fire, and it goes from fire on this side, as you can see the detail, to water and heaven on this side. It's very beautiful as sort of a book can be. And then inside there's similarly nice and themed illustrations here and there, which I don't have these bookmarked, but on the covers.
Yeah, there's also illustrations in the pages too, where they're talking about the circles of hell, whether it's a coral, whether it's this shape or the other shape. There are illustrations to help you understand what Alice and Peter are ranting about.
Yeah, this is Peter's map.
Yep.
Try and I'll just hold it there for a couple seconds. You can kind of get a look at it.
Yeah, there it is.
And there's a couple other Alice's map as a comparison.
Oh, yeah.
But I love when authors take the time to... Here's Elsbeth's map.
Yeah.
To take the time and give us these illustrations, because you can explain it, but it's something else when you actually show me a picture of what you meant to try to describe as well.
Agreed.
So, all right. Shall we?
Let's do it.
Continue our descent.
Let's descend. So, since this is one episode for the whole book, I'm just going to hit the highlights of the chapters, and maybe this first section will be chapters 1 through 6 or so, but I'll hit some of the main points from the summary here. I won't be reading everything like we normally do, and then we'll just go back and forth and talk about it. So, ever since the untimely death of magic student Alice's law dissertation advisor, Professor Jacob Grimes, Cambridge University, she has been researching how to venture back into hell to retrieve him from Lord Yama, the Lord of the Underworld. So she draws a herd chalk inscription, but is interrupted by her rival, Peter Murdoch. He's naturally gifted at magic, well-versed in the machinations of the academic institution, and can tell from her inscription where she's going. He alters her inscription so it can transport both of them, and they go to hell. Alice blames herself for Grimes' death. He delegated double-checking his pentagrams to his graduate students. Overworked, exploited, and exhausted, she failed to close the loop and caused his body to break apart when he cast the spell. So he exploded. And now she doesn't have an advisor. And because Allison is so singularly focused into getting into magic, and so she's so obsessed with academic purity and academic rigor, she wants him to be her advisor. Nobody else will do because he's the best at what he does. So she's going back to hell, Peter in tow, to get Grimes' back. Chapter 2, they're in hell, and like I said, it seems like a reverse image of Cambridge's graduate lab. And it's not the hell that you imagined from any movies or books or your own imagination or what Hollywood and the common parlance has taught us, right? It's completely different. And they meet a cat named
Archimedes? right?
Archimedes. There you go. Yeah, Archimedes. Yep.
Archimedes. Yes.
So they in chapter 3 we find them trying to reach the top of a wall, and this is where their shared history is revealed, that they might have been lovers or at least flirted before, they liked each other. And what I mentioned earlier in our intro, they sleep next to each other for warmth. He wakes up with a morning erection. He gets all like out of his mind about it, and she's awkward, but she's trying to calm him down. He's just apologizing profusely, whatever that was. But chapter 4, they make it to the other side of the wall, and they see a big barren desert. And Peter mentions he felt like Alice and Grimes were at odds before his death, and reveals he got a prestigious award that Grimes had told Alice she would get. So this is where he plays them against each other. She reveals Grimes took her on a research trip to Italy that Peter was supposed to go on. Here they apologize to each other. Alice thinks back to before starting her PhD, when she was told to explore options other than a tenure track job. And there's talk about conservative governments in Europe and the United States, and the emphasis on profit. Tenure jobs and magic are rare. It's difficult to work in a field that's outside academia, the magic field outside academia. But Alice is not willing to entertain any of these options, and she's processing the history, her own history, and how she got here. And then Alice wakes up nestled next to Peter in chapter 5, and that's where he gets the erection, the sleeping erection. So it's in chapter 5, not chapter 2. But they get over that. As they eat, they discuss their own maps of hell. That's what you showed the audience just a few minutes ago. And before they leave, Peter again brings up their sleeping arrangement. Alice wishes their relationship could be as easy as it had been in the past. As Peter talks, the wall they descended yesterday disappears, and hell takes shape of a place they both are familiar with, campus. Then, on a section titled On Reincarnation, the book explains that hell is not a place of eternal damnation. Rather, souls are continuously flowing, page 78, between worlds as one is reincarnated, though no one can agree on how it works. They also do not know the role of punishment as it relates to hell. They do know, or they think they know, souls eventually travel to Lord Yama in other mythologies, Hades, Anubis, and they continue that discussion. In chapter 6, the map settles into a classical-looking campus, but with no greenery or undergraduates. Only the library building is in focus, and Allison realizes it must be the first court Pride. Inside, shades, that's what the souls are called, that go to hell. Shades move between the stacks. A shade informs Alice and Peter that they must perform a task to move on, and it is to give an oral defense of their answer to the prompt, to find the good. A shade named George Edward Moore volunteers to give them a tour. He explains that people can end up in Pride for anything, for insisting people cite their own research, to simply being a creative writing student. So you die, you go to hell, and here you have to defend the good, whatever the good is. Moore takes him to his office. He wants to talk to Peter about Cambridge because he really loves Cambridge. And here we see Kuang commenting on the misogyny of academia, which I've seen in my own experience with my own eyes, where Moore, all he does is talk about Peter and goes, "Es Cambridgemen, es Cambridgemen, es Cambridgemen," but completely ignores Alice. So Moore says that they have to answer the research question first, but admits no one has solved it satisfactorily during his time there. Alice gets him to agree that if he uses two premises to support the conclusion that they must complete the question, they'll stay. Moore gets lost in adding new premises, and Alice and Peter sneak away. So that's 1 through 6 there. Yeah. My commentary stays from where I told you in private conversations. Love this. Concept is great. By the time I got to chapter 6, though, I was like, okay, it's still cool. I'm not totally hating, but I'm just not drawn into it.
You and me both. Especially, I know that we're not there yet, but chapter 12 is where I kind of got lost. Where I kind of gave up, like, all right, this is not going to be, because this is not going to be what I had hoped for. Because when we read summaries, when we hear concepts, we're like, oh man, and our imagination is triggered, which is great because we're like, oh, it could be like this could be fun. Oh, what if they tied in, blah blah blah. It's cool, it's engaging. Like, you've got me. Look, You got me enough where we bought the book and we said, this looks good, the summary sounds fun, let's do it. And so we did, and here we are, right? But it was just like, it felt like young adult dark academia, but what young adults are going through set in, and we talked about this earlier, set in grad school, and so like young adults assuming what grad school will be like because they haven't experienced the world yet. And that's kind of our biggest critique here. Like, I heard some of the ones that you did some research on, but it's like, all right, some of them, to your point, I also don't agree with. Because when you woke up next to me with Morning Glory, I didn't complain. I was just like, oh yeah, that's pretty normal. You'll laugh about that later. All right.
Well, I was gonna say one thing that just came to me, because later on in the book we realized that Peter saw Grimes sexually abusing Alice.
Yep.
And maybe that's why Peter is insistent on apologizing and always is so careful to reference Alice's safety and autonomy, integrity. So, okay, again, I get it, but it could have been executed better. He just seems so awkward doing it. He could have been more, dare I say, forceful or more. And I don't want the author to spoil it all in the front. I just didn't see his responses to what I understood later as like, oh, okay, it's because he saw her being abused. But his responses seemed not believable to me in the moment.
The characters, here's the thing. The complexity that the characters hold that we get to read when you go through the book comes across as young adult. Again, that's fine. That's not it's not that young adult books shouldn't exist. It's just that it's a mismatch in my mind of time and place versus experience and maturity of characters. Because the thing is, I do believe those characters are being authentic. I just don't think that authenticity gels with being in grad school. That's it. That's literally my one hang up. So anyway, let's keep rolling here.
All right. So the next section that I broke out is chapter 7 through 11. So they leave the first court and are faced with the Lethe, which runs between the courts of Lord Yama's domain. And the Lethe is a river of forgetting. After one forgets their memories, they can be reincarnated. Alice sees Old Lady Mengpo, who is a guardian of the river, who enchants Alice into wanting to forget her memories. Peter manages to bring her back to herself. They walk along the river, but the second court gets no closer. This I kind of liked, where they keep walking and walking, and it seemed endless. And there's this feeling of hopelessness that Alice gets, or they're distraught, both of them, because they want to do this thing, which is find Grimes and drag him back to Earth, but...
And Alice is dark when you get to the later parts, but
yeah,
what she was going to do. So keep going.
Yeah. But here, chapter 7 is long enough in a 35-chapter book that they've experienced some things, and they have. But one would think, as this is in-world, this is not even a critique, this is just an in-world observation, one would think, like, okay, after a couple days in hell, I have at least made some strides, but not so much. Anyway, along the way, creatures made of bone and chalk converge on them. They manage to scare these bone things by getting close to the Lethe, as chalk recalls deep memory and the Lethe erases memory. Even though the bone things leave, their existence confirms the presence of another keen and rational mind, a quote from page 113 in Hell, who is watching them. Chapter 8, They stop for the night. Peter, who excels at math, proposes the construction of a magical paradox where they bind the infinite space of hell into a shortcut to where Grimes is most likely to be. His test pentagram fades upon drawing, as does Alice's. They realize they cannot draw chalk pentagrams due to magic in hell, which frightens Alice, as they thought that was their defense. Or they thought it was a sure defense, let's say. Here's where Allison falls into despair. Peter distracts her with talk of chalk. I kind of found this actually, cute, where he, although again, my critique is like, dude, you're a grown man. You can do the same thing. You can be helpful and playful with a friend and not do it the way you're doing it. But I got past it because I thought this was a pretty cute scene. He insists that they are Grimes' students and so will find a way to survive. Here's where the cat, Archimedes, joins them. He is terrified because he's been hurt by the bone things, but he becomes friends, quote unquote, with them. He follows them around. Chapter 9, Archimedes is actually the one who leads them toward Desire, which is the second court. And this court trapped you with enticements and made you the cause of your own suffering. Page 128 for those following along. And here Allison recalls a speech Grimes gave when they were first years about how they could adhere to intellectualism and discipline and not that which is degeneracy, is bodily, is filth. Here's where kind of Grimes' mind fuckery is revealed. Alice tried to integrate this asceticism into her own life. She would withhold food for most of the day, but always broke before reaching Zen. And here's where I had some empathy for her, because I'm like, holy crap. Like, I can critique you for, being so overly ambitious that you hurt yourself and others, but I also now see that you were kind of poisoned by this guy. So it's more than just, Alice just sucks. It's a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
So there's a storm. That's a rainstorm that comes down in Desire. There's endless doors. In each door, a shade sits, trapped in a repetitive pleasure-seeking act like masturbating, drinking, or sniffing old books. That I thought was interesting, that those three are mentioned, specifically in reference to academia.
When you went through academia, did you regularly come across people in the stacks, self-aggrandizing, to put it more kindly for the audience?
I've never caught anybody self-aggrandizing in the stacks. I did catch people sniffing books, though.
Okay, but that's a real thing. I'm just going to pause for a second. Where, I don't know. So scent is like a really powerful memory trigger.
Yeah.
Where you can are you going to turn this into a short?
Maybe.
There's just something about it. So, to me, when I smell a new book, it reminds me of the Scholastic Book Fair. It reminds me of Pokemon cards. It triggers these memories of oh yeah, I remember childhood, right? So that's the only one of the three that I will pull out as well, I understand that one.
Yeah.
I don't go to the library and self-aggrandize.
Yeah.
Personal self-fulfillment.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So Allison becomes judgmental about desires so deep that they overcome the mind. She insists that Grimes is not there. Peter thinks he is. Maybe there's a chance he is, at least. He opens a door behind which two shades are having intercourse. Alice starts having a series of hallucinations of objectified and sexualized women. So this is her trauma response. This is the body keeps the score kind of thing. And she feels her body is far away. So she's definitely reliving the trauma that Grimes foisted upon her. She runs out of the building into the rain and vomits. In a flashback of their Italy trip in the previous summer, Grimes asks Alice what she desires. She says success and lists its trappings. He calls those the byproducts of desire and repeats his question, grabbing her aggressively. He says she has to desire the work itself, not not its benefits. She remembers watching him speak, being overcome by the realization of what she could become, and feeling inextricably bound up in him. That's page 141. They walk away from the building through the storm and see 12 bone things running towards them. Archimedes takes off, and Alice and Peter run for the Lethe again. Alice takes 2 hunting knives out of her pack. When they reach the river, they try to tell the bone things they mean no harm, but they are attacked. Peter tells Alice to aim for their spines. She runs to the Lethe and is accidentally splashed. She scoops some up in her flask and sprays it over the bone things, sizzling their chalk parts. The creatures attack her, and they fall together into the water. Boom. Kind of like that. That part was kind of cool. I'll say that. Alice walks with Peter above her, asking if she remembers him and herself. She hasn't lost any memories. All the bone things are destroyed. When they make camp, Peter wants to test Alice's memory. She tells him she can't forget anything and reveals a carved pentagram on her skin. She confirms it was Grimes's work. In Italy the previous summer, he had experimented on animals until deciding to try it on Alice. Holy crap. Though she gave her permission under duress, she has been extremely afraid. The procedure made her pass out and vomit blood, but it was successful. Peter apologizes that Grimes put her in that position, which also frustrates Alice, who believes she wanted it to happen. She thinks back to a conference and how other women would react when they found out Grimes was her advisor, warning her of Grimes' misconduct. Peter reminisces on Grimes' department funeral and the kind of platitudes people levied at him. He says he and Alice are the only ones who really knew Grimes. They believe they were tormented because they were strong enough to withstand it. Alice wants to thank Peter for listening and commiserating, but doesn't. And chapter 11, it goes into explaining principles of classical logic, the law of non-contradiction, the excluded middle, some paradoxes. Alice thinks back to her first dinner at Cambridge, where the entire cohort but Peter was present. Everyone else started talking about Peter's accomplishments and academic parentage until he showed up. When he introduces himself to Alice, she told him she was Grimes' other student. They made plans to get drink the next evening and discuss their project. They showed up the next day, but Peter never arrived. Over the next year, she learned that Peter rarely kept his appointments. She and the rest of her cohort hypothesized about why, but no one knew. When he did show up, he was bright, interested, and reliable. During the first 2 years, they nevertheless shared good memories, and Alice had thought she'd be able to crack his armor, but he always pulled away. That's where we end there. So this section, like I've mentioned here and there in reading the summaries, I kind of like this section. I thought it, despite my critiques of the book overall, I found myself a little bit more intrigued by this section. Because of the backstories, and it seems like maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe I'm wrong, to correct me if that's the case. We got a little bit more into the heads of the characters.
Abuse, people shouldn't, she was under duress.
Yeah.
But the introduction of both entities, Alice and her experience, and we got a little bit of snippets, and it will continue to be unpacked as the story continues. And then Peter, we get that he's, this prodigy who gets to kind of walk in with whatever he wants and do whatever he wants, is not a unique experience. I think everybody probably, saying probably all the time, I would say that everyone might be able to relate to having an academic rival. If you care about school. If you don't, then you won't even care. It won't even matter. But
Yep.
There's usually someone who is favorited. In this instance, it's 2 people, and he used it to pit them against each other, which should add a nice drama, a nice tension.
Right. So this brings us to the next section. The way I broke it up here is 12 through 18. Alice's pentagram scars severely alter her dreams, which layer dreams and reality in horrible new hallucinations for her. She dreams she's abducted by Grimes with a horse head. They get to the steps from desire to greed. She remembers back to her first year when Grimes called her into his office for tea. He told her Peter was her competition and she'd have to work twice as hard as him for a portion of his success. They descend the steps, and Peter tries to guess at the occupations of the shade, passing into greed. There's a woman who materializes in front of them. Alice recognizes the Chinese mythological figure Weaver Girl, a deity who followed her mortal lover into the afterlife. Weaver Girl separates them and presents a test. A red apple representing going forward together, while the green represents going alone. If they both choose red, they both proceed. If they both choose green, they both get thrown into the Lethe. If one chooses red and the other chooses green, the one who chooses green moves forward. Alice resolves to pick red, but has a series of memories and hallucinations that convince her that she hates Peter. She comes back to herself with an apple in her hand, and it's the wrong apple. During Chapter 13 is a summary of a winter Alice and Peter's first year, and Grimes' fourth-year student suddenly left for Canada after an ultimatum from his girlfriend. Alice and Peter were recruited to work uncredited hours to make up for the loss. After Grimes' project ended, though, Peter pulls away. He merely nods in greeting and refuses to engage any of their old kind of inside jokes or their old relationship that they had built. Alice goes to Italy. In the memory, again, chapter 13 gives us a summary of those memories. In chapter 14, Alice thinks she's still reasoning through which apple to grab, but she looks down, she sees she's holding the green apple. Weaver Girl tells Alice to go alone and begins to wrap Peter in a silk web. When Peter's almost fully encased, bone things set upon them. They pick up Alice and begin to carry her. But a horn scatters them, and a boatman arrives and begins fighting the boat things. She brings Alice and Peter into the boat before the Weaver Girl can reclaim them. The boatman turns out to be a boat woman, Elpis, and Alice recognizes. She was a Grimes advisee who died by suicide 10 years ago. And they begin to get a little, us as the readers get some exposition, and Alice and Peter get a little deep dive on Elpis and Grimes and a little bit of the rules of hell. Elpis says that the Crikes have taken on the attributes of deities in hell. And she thinks the bone things contain fragments of their minds. Elpis gives them food. It's rats for dinner, roasted rats. Peter asks how she and the Crikes use magic. She cuts herself and dips the chalk in the blood before writing a pentagram that will fix Peter's scratches. And then in 16, Elpis invites Peter and Alice into her home and shows them her library filled with books. She fished out of the Lethe. Alice begins to ask who Alice's advisor is. Allison lies and says Helen Murray. Elpis tells them, my advisor was Grimes, and she was extremely stressful until the absolute farce of it all. And then they talk about philosophical paradoxes, and Alice knows Elpis wants to help in all this that she's doing, the food, the discussion of the paradoxes, all the advice. Alice knows Elpis wants to help, but feels resentful. So they leave in chapter 17. They leave Elpis.
I call her Elspeth because it's a common misinterpretation of, and I was going to bring this up to you actually, Elizabeth is this idea of like who this character is, but there is no Greek person or Greek mythology noted as Elspeth or Elizabeth, but actually the word for hope or the spirit of hope is Elpis. The spirit of hope is related to Pandora's box, and Abby was on Girl with All the Gifts, which is a retelling of Pandora's box. So There's that little thing there. But a couple other things that Elspeth is supposed to represent hope for Alice and Peter. But we'll get into that more later, maybe.
Yeah.
Another thing that pointed out to me in this section is I want to applaud the author for weaving in these like Asian mythology creatures, right? Like there's only one in the book that I can remember, and it's this one. I wish we had more time with it, but it's like a trickster fairy, and there's like an opportunity here. And if you've never read Asian mythology, whether it's Chinese, Japanese, Korean, etc., or whatever, like they have some wild like mythos that I deeply encourage you like take the opportunity and enjoy. So having that woven in was fun. I very much liked that.
Yeah. I did too. There's moments in this book, despite everything, that I was captivated because it was something that
That's a good word.
haven't been exposed to before, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. So, yeah. So in chapter 17, real quick, Alice wakes Peter in the night to convince him to find the Lethe before Lethe does, so they can use it to bargain for Grimes' life. Peter is shocked by Allison's desire to betray their ally. Archimedes is listening and warns Alice not to tell Lethe.
Yeah, two other things that stood out to me up until this point. One is a gripe of like and I sent you in this in the notes, that the setup tension for the prisoner's dilemma when Alice is in chapter like earlier when she's dealing with that mythological creature where she has to make a decision is I would have liked more of the romance on the front end of the tension to make there be a stronger difficulty for me as the reader to go, is she going to be like a bitter lover, or is she going to, choose him before that moment, which requires more foreshadowing, right? And then I also made a comment in my notes here that it seemed like the author was almost making a commentary on marriage and relationships throughout the book, which we don't have to get into. It was just something, it was an observation that I had, or an impression that I had. But let's deviate for a second. How did you feel about these common interjections of logic puzzles or logic explanations where it's like, hey, actually, pause, reader, this is the prisoner's dilemma, and da-da-da-da-da-da, or hey, pause, you can't have P and not P, which, I mean, you're getting a logic class in this book, which is fine, and I even believe that it is coherent with the authenticity of the characters. I even believe that. However, as a reader, what was your take on that?
I had a difficult time deciding if I hated or loved it. Well, it came up. I listened to it because it was an audiobook. I paid attention, but I think they went on a little too long. But I don't know. I'm kind of in the murky middle with it. Like, if they weren't there, I wouldn't have missed them. If they were shorter, they probably could have been, value added. I don't hate him. That's not a critique of the book that I have. There's
Sure.
some people critique that that took away from the narrative. I agree in part.
Why.
Yeah, I agree in part because they were so long. I don't agree in principle that it in and of itself is a distraction from the narrative. I just think they're a little bit too long. But I can see both sides, and here's where I'm going to just, play Sweden. Yeah, I don't care.
In this instance, I am going to play Sweden with you. I know that there have been previous episodes where I grill you on like making a decision.
Yeah.
But I think that intellectuals do talk like this.
Yeah.
You and I talk like this sometimes, where it's like, well, it's not actually this, it's this, and you go off on a diatribe about a thing that, like, for some reason, and I think it's different for you and I, but I think for these characters, they have this pride of need to be right and to be accurate because that's the realm that they're living in, and so they're correcting each other on their intellectual knowledge and these specific things, which for the author is makes your exposition a lot easier. Exposition being like, hey, reader, let me explain to you what's going on. It's very much like anime. If you ever watched anime where it's like, why can't we defeat him? Well, it's because he has a level 3 shield that only my weapon can get through, and then I will have to stab him in the heart because that's what happens. And here's the thing. I love anime. So it's not a jab at it. It's just like that's the level of spoon-fed exposition that you're going to get. And so, to your point, I didn't hate it. I remembered my logic classes from undergrad, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. However, I think the story would be stronger if it was shorter at minimum, maybe not fully explained every single time.
Yeah. Or if they alluded to or referenced these things and had shorter explanations, and that explanation was woven more into like a fight that they have or a disagreement that they had.
A fight, a correction, let me fix your pentagram. Right, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It did feel like a class, though. And as we're kind of giving our oral review of this, I honestly feel like I'm getting to know the author more by our critiques rather than less.
Yeah.
And it's not like Mayville.
Yeah, no, it's never near that. And I didn't hate Mayville as much as you did, although I do share critiques. But
Sheer
here,
loathing.
it's nowhere near your hate or my hate for that City in the City book. I just think the execution failed. But, you know, who am I? Like, I'm just a guy on the internet discussing a book. So I stand by what I say, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, quickly to wrap up, Alice does convince Peter to betray Elsep. Elsep uses magic and to get them to reveal their betrayal and disappears, turns into butterflies and disappears. And they sail past Greed, the third court, which takes them... Nope, I'm messing up. So they begin to sail past Greed, to the third court, and this is where figures out their plot to hurt her in some way or betray her. She transforms into butterflies and runs away, alters the pentagram to make Peter and Alice tell the truth. They admit that they're here to rescue Grimes, butterflies swarming them, carrying them off the ship and onto the shore of Wrath. That's what happens. I had some notes here that they have lines and circles and everything, and I kind of went off kilter for a second, but that's where we end in chapter 18.
Bring us through chapter 20 at the moment. My wife's not back with the money that I need to go pick up these lights anyway. And we'll see, what did I say, there's 37 chapters? Let's see if we can
35.
get through 35. Let's see if we can get pretty close.
Yep. So in chapter 18, real quickly, Peter tries to proceed without Alice on shore. He reminds her she'd have abandoned him to the Weaver Girl and thinks her idea to betray Elsep was wrong. Alan rushes to catch up with him. They're both drawn into the water of a bog by the arms of the shades reaching out to grab their legs. Peter wants to return and beg for re-entry into the world. He sees no way they can make it out alive, since they don't know the way back. Peter's distressed. He laments being led to death because Alice wanted to be Grimes' favorite and was in love with him. She corrects him, saying that she could finally breathe after he died, but went on a journey because she was the one who killed him. And we get to chapter 20. Alice reflects on how she scorned the feminist movement, refusing to be an ally to female classmates and wondering why women spent time proving they weren't inferior, but rather than simply not being inferior. She was shocked at the treatment she received after entering Cambridge. Alice fantasized about relationships with Grimes, romantic relationships with Grimes, and knew he found her attractive. One day Alice was working late in the office at Grimes' request. Grimes is entered with a new office assistant, a woman named Charlotte, and they began to have sex, though Grimes knew Allison was there. When Grimes made eye contact with her, she left. Alice thinks about the memories so much she begins to blame herself for being there. After a prize dinner, Grimes and Alice were both drunk on the attention they were receiving, and Grimes insisted they go to his office to lesson plan. Grimes grabbed her face, and rather than feeling romantic, Alice felt trapped. She contemplated saying yes to make him happy, was overwhelmed with disgust. She said she did not want to proceed, and over Grimes' shoulder she saw Peter before he rushed away. She screamed no at Grimes and left. After that, he withdrew his support. And then later on, she began having suicidal ideations. She was most disturbed by her reduction to a thing, page 323. She perceives this as a cliche, ultimately does not want to die by suicide. And she thinks of those people who do that's, she kind of has a bad view of them and doesn't want people to think she failed because she committed suicide.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually realizing now, one of the things that I would have liked to been woven in for Alice's story in particular is more of her cultural upbringing, because she's clearly not American, or she has an ethnicity that is implied with King Yama, especially when we get to the end and he's like, I can be Hades, I can be Satan, I can be, and she's like, well, I'm familiar with King Yama, so let's do that, right? I would have liked more of her cultural upbringing, because I think it would have made the stuff that you and I have gripes about, or nitpicking, I think it would have put that more into context. And I think we would have been more receptive to it. Because I'm thinking through, if this woman, Alice, is Asian, and she comes from a culture where you have to be perfect all the time, and you have to be in line and prim and proper, and you can't make mistakes, then more of this lines up, right? From what I know about Asian culture and the not particular, what's the word? Attentiveness to detail. I'll say there's a different word, but that'll work for right now. That they take in all of the things that they do. It would line up more, and I think I'd have less gripes or less nits if there was a cultural explanation from I come from, a Korean family, blah blah blah. Here's how grandma used to treat us. Our parents, we were never able to do anything wrong, something like that, right?
Yeah. So what you're saying is you want more, which I am backing you up 110% in this instance.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It's not the generic more either. It's actually, I think it's just the same thing I always say. Is it the same thing? Is it the same thing? Okay.
It's the same thing.
All right. Well,
and I agree with you. Those moments would have been helpful for me to get, more, not infatuated, in line with the character, attached to the character, if those things happened. As I'm talking out loud, because some of this is prepared, some of it is me talking extemporaneously as we go back and forth, and there's a change in my perception a little bit. There's a few notches over to the right or the left, wherever liking the book versus being, oh gosh, I don't think I like this book on the spectrum that I'm on right now. I think I'm a couple more notches closer to liking the book.
Me too.
Yeah, because as we're talking about it, because in text and voice text, and as I'm listening and writing down notes and us talking, those are immediate responses. But now that I've had a week and a half to think about it since reading it and putting down notes on paper and talking through those notes and other thoughts coming up, yes, to your point, that would have made it better. But I also have a little bit more appreciation for Alice. And here, again, sorry for being a broken record, but it still fails to me in execution. As we're parsing this out, exegeting the book, we are finding things that are, captivating, that are interesting, that are fascinating. But I think the editors, I'm not even going to crap on Kuang. I think the editors did her dirty. I'll agree with some of the negative commentators. They pointed this out because they say, I loved the other book. I loved Babel. What the hell is going on here? So maybe it's just an editing thing.
That's an interesting note.
Yeah.
If you guys know, drop us a link in the comments. Did she use the same editor? If so, we're absolutely throwing that person under the bus with our limited knowledge. But I've read other authors where they switched editors and people complained. So that's a really good possible observation here, that maybe it's not her, maybe it's her editor.
Yep.
To your point, though, I'm going to say I think I like the book at like a 5 out of 10 when I read it, but dialoguing now and kind of like, oh, hey, and pieces are kind of getting in place, I think I like it like a 6 or 6.5, maybe a 7 at the most. Because, yeah, the execution's still not where I think that it should have been for what it was.
Yep.
But I think in dialoguing about it, or if you will, like retasting it literarily, it's better. It's what's the Japanese flavor? Umami. It's like umami.
Yep. I would say I was somewhere 4.5. When I began reading it and I got to like chapter 5, 6, I was somewhere at, well, let me rephrase this and make this more coherent. When I started reading it, I was somewhere at a 6. And then as I progressed slowly through chapter 5 and onward, it came down to about a 4.5. And now that we're talking about it, I'm probably somewhere at 6.5. So, I'm okay with it, more so.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Something that I wish more authors did a book trailer, because I think she would actually sell more copies. Because again, the concept's awesome. Like, it's great. It's fun. It's a good time. For those who don't know, a book trailer is basically the author has a short animated to create a trailer for their book in visual form to get people to buy the book. It's a lot easier these days because of AI. So if you are an author and you're listening to this, highly recommend making a book trailer, at least one, maybe multiple, about your book to tease that we should dive into your world.
Cool. So, chapter 21, Peter listens to Allison's story without questioning her. He asks her what her plan was to release Grimes from hell, and Alice tells the story of an ancient magician called Ericto, who was mentioned briefly in Inferno, but is also found in other myths. She brought an enemy's corpse soul back from the underworld into the remains on the battlefield to tell a prophecy. Alice wants to do the same thing to Grimes, to bond his hollow soul to his corpse, to get power over him, and make him beg for release. Peter listens and asks a few clarifying questions, but again, without judging, Alice confesses that she liked the plan because it was what Grimes would do. Peter holds her hand, and she feels safe for the first time. In 22, Peter's privilege growing up taught him to expect success and made him careless. When he was a child, a tutor identified his intelligence, but he was diagnosed with Crohn's disease and was chronically ill, and as a result did not interact with peers until he passed his A-levels. He first liked Cambridge and immediately liked Alice. Halfway through their first years, his worst Crohn's flare-up since his childhood started. His old medicine stopped working, and he was constantly in the hospital and became very ill. The flare-up interfered with his completion of an important, innovative pentagram. He decided to stop getting help and deteriorated quickly, but someone found him and called an ambulance before he died. Grimes forced Peter to prove the pentagrams of his own stolen work for Grimes to use, so Peter did so quickly and sloppily. The next day, he learned of Grimes' death. A while later, he saw the equations Alice left on the chalkboard and realized she wanted to go to hell and decided to follow her. That was kind of cool. I thought that both of them thinking they killed Grimes, and then the slower reveal of that I enjoyed. That here we get Peter going, no, actually I think killed Grimes. That was a good part of the book. In chapter 23, Alice believes Peter, but is shocked that Grimes would steal work. Okay. Peter wants her to stop valorizing Grimes. They realize they've been pitted against each other for years. Peter starts working on new mathematical theorems. Alice tries to convince him that death will be a relief until she falls unconscious. When she wakes, Peter's figured out how to escape. He's created an equation from the Hangman's paradox, a recursive paradox about the impossibility of an event happening on an unexpected day within a set quantity of days. He writes it for only one person, believing it won't work on him. But Alice declares they leave together or not at all. She becomes close to admitting she has feelings for Peter, but doesn't. Chapter 24, Alice thinks back on her first meeting with Grimes. He said her application was the strongest he ever had, and urged her not to let anyone make her feel like she didn't belong in Cambridge. She learned that Grimes also rose to academia from unlikely circumstances. In Chapter 25, Alice tries and fails to free Peter because he got himself trapped with the pentagram that he created. It backfired.
Yep.
She's crying now, and she hears Peter stop screaming because he's being... remind me what happens to him, because he starts getting torn apart or something? Or what exactly happens?
Yeah, so the Hangman's paradox allows Alice to not be attacked by the Crypt keys.
Yes.
And Peter then is able to be attacked by the Crypt keys.
So she passes into cruelty after she stops hearing Peter's screams. She leaves as she passes into cruelty and sees Shade trapped in bone cages they could easily escape from if they wished. She can't stop thinking about Peter. The desert turns into Deadlands, and she moves into Tyranny, the next court. When she stops for food, she tries to think up reasons to stay alive, now that she knows what death looks like. While she doesn't care about rescuing Grimes anymore, she wants to honor Peter's sacrifice, and so she continues with her plan. And at Chapter 26, Alice wakes, and a Shade is watching her. Archimedes is gone again. The Shade knows she's alive and a magician and wants to talk. She admits her quest to the Shade, who says he'll tell her how to get to the gates of Dis. In return, he wants information on the world of the living. He introduces himself as John Gratis. He doesn't care about politics or history, but wants to know what the London skyline looks like and what music people listen to. So they exchange information. They talk for a while. Several hours later, they arrive at Dis, which Alice has read about in many stories. Alice thinks the city looks beautiful and vicious. Gratis says that the Shades there won't hurt her, but when she asks him what he did to end up in the final court, he says if she wants to survive, she can never ask that question.
Another moment of applause for the author is when you dig into what she references, like the city of Dis, like that's a throwback to Roman mythology, and Dis is actually just the Roman word for both the god and city of the underworld. But it's also, correct me if I missed something here, Slava, but the city of Dis is a fortified region in the underworld ruled by Pluto from Virgil's Aeneid, the story.
Yeah. Well, if you're not getting that from ChatGPT, you're correct. If you're reading Wikipedia or any Google article, then yes, that's true.
I don't understand your commentary to me just now, but all right. Yes.
Well, you said correct me if I'm wrong or something. What would you say? You asked me about Dis, if you were right about Dis.
I'm pulling in your memory of like and I don't even think I'm saying it right. The Aeneid, right? Virgil's Aeneid, whatever. And then also Dante's Inferno, which Slava and I realized we should add to the list. So, verbal for the audience, we're going to add Dante's Inferno to our to be read list, which, as all of you bookgoers know, your TBR is ever growing and ever expanding. So,
yeah, this is also in Dante's Inferno.
The lower hell.
Yep.
Encircled by iron walls, where most serious sinners are punished.
So, chapter 27, Dis's courtyard is mostly full of middle-aged men. Alice sees them submitting their dissertations. Gratis explains that no one tells them if they don't pass. They just wait indefinitely until deciding to try again. Good Lord. Gratis takes her to a writing workshop with a group of professors arguing about drafts of their dissertations until they come to physical blows. When fire begins to fall from the skies, shades rush out to catch on fire. When Cerberus enters through the gate, they rush to get torn up. Gratis says they want pain because they want to feel something. Wow. Only one shade, Gertrude, doesn't join. She invites Allison to talk about her perspective, which Gratis calls a cult. Gertrude leads Allison to the Rebel Citadel. The buildings are whole, and the air is fresh. Gertrude says that every object finds its way to Dis eventually. They are gradually building a great city where select shades can enjoy peace. Alice wanders around, finding the splendor lifeless up close. She comes upon a withered tree that shrinks away and whispers when she touches it. She enters a garden of many thorny, knobby trees and realizes they are all shades. She asks why don't they choose to die, rather than waiting for the end. A shade wakes up from its stump, runs to the Lethe, and destroys itself. Part of Alice is jealous, while another part finally realizes that she doesn't want to die. She runs out of the Rebel Citadel, through the bazaar, and away from the city and the Lethe. By chapter 29, Alice runs until she loses track of the Lethe, which startles her. The Lethe was the only limit of infinity in hell, meaning she might be lost in infinity. All she knows how to do is to walk as time slips by. She begins to pass relics of civilization she doesn't recognize. She repeatedly reminds herself who she is, and all her memories begin to bother her less. An emaciated leopard that was wandering from the above ground begins to stalk Alice. Kills the leopard. She hangs knives. He creates a trap and kills the leopard. She spots the pentagram used to make the trap and is able to use the leopard's trap to write a counter spell, narrowly escaping the knives. She builds a fire and uses the knives to harvest the leopard's meat and organs. She cooks and eats them, feeling her body's material wants and strength for the first time in a long time. Chapter 30, Gratis finds her. She apologized for following Gertrude. He says he helped build the Rebel Citadel, but spent too much time debating whether to jump to the Lethe, so he left. He philosophizes about why people don't choose to die when it seems like the most logical choice. He is searching for that answer. He asks every sojourner he finds. He asks her what she's going to do, and she says she's going to kill the Crypt keys. He points her to the river, but tells her she'll need protection. She makes weapons and armor from the leopard's bones. She decides she has to fight for her life. Gratis tells Alice to snort chalk. When she does, she's flooded with memories that aren't hers from the ancient sea creatures who make up the chalk.
When I read that, I just started laughing because I was like, there's just a lot of rubber banding going on like the second half of this book where it's like, okay, City of Dis, okay, you met a guide again. All right, cool, checks out, fine. The guide is mysterious. Also funny when people are like throwing themselves at Cerberus, which is a three-headed dog for those who aren't as familiar with Greek mythology. Whatever the quote was you read where it's like they just to like feel something or whatever. And I'm like, that feels very human. And seems like a thing that people would do in this type of hell where they're like, I've been alive now for God knows how long, literally, and I just need to die. I'm just going to throw myself at one of the mouths of Cerberus or let myself be burned alive because I simply don't want to exist anymore. Like that, all of that was funny to me. And then it's like, hey, buddy, you know what you could do? Grind up some of this chalk and just give it the old, oh.
The grad students taking coke to pass exams or something, or to be able to stay up all night.
Yes. Yeah. So, anyway, carry on.
After she snorts the chalk, she feels capable of, quote, devouring the universe. I say she's doing coke. That's...
It's called chalk in this universe, and they use it. Oh, man, those would be expensive pentagrams, though, if they were just, like, sprinkling coke.
Like pure Bolivian coke? Yeah.
Yeah. That's expensive. Maybe that's the cost to get to hell is like 1/4 of your life or half your life because it's just so expensive.
Right.
I understood now, Kuang. I get it. I get it now.
Alice finds high ground near the river, this is 31, and draws many pentagrams and paradoxes, and Gratis leaves. A horde of bone things arrives. Most are taken out by her pentagrams as she gleefully destroys those that aren't coked up out of her mind, murdering crypt keys left and right. Nick, Magnolia, and Theophrastus crypt key arrive and destroy her spells. Theophrastus charges her. Alice grabs him easily, but Magnolia attacks, and she drops him. She fights Magnolia until they are positioned over Zeno's trap she made. She punctures Magnolia's bags of blood, so she and Theophrastus can't escape. Alice moves to her more complex work as Nick follows her. His magician's curiosity makes him pause to read her work. She tries to cast the spell inspired by Ericto, substituting Grimes' name for Nick's, but Nick strangles her. Archimedes arrives, gives her enough time to finish her recitation and close the pentagram circle. Alice had dug up Grimes' body, intending to fasten it to his soul. Now she brings Nick to the place between Cambridge and Hell, binding his soul to Grimes' remains above. In the hell layer of the room, she drags him towards the Lethe. They both tip in the river. 32.
That's that revelation that I mentioned earlier where Alice was like, she took his, what'd you say, dismembered corpse and put it on a pentagram so that she could bring him back alive. This is a revenge story, which I didn't realize at the beginning, because this woman is dealing with trauma of being sexually abused, and then she's going to then do something equivalent to her abuser to make a point or to feel better about it, or both.
Yeah. If Quentin Tarantino is listening, he should make a revenge flick about this.
So I found out that there actually is a book trailer. We'll do a reaction video to it later. So stay tuned for that.
Yes, we should do that. But, chapter 32. They land painfully in the shallow water. Alice cannot move. Nick runs to shore, but his memories are erased until he dissolves. Magnolia picks up Theophrastus and walks towards the water. As their memories peel away, Alice thinks about how much she admired the crypt keys. She snuck into one of Magnolia's talks once and was amazed how adoringly Nick watched her and how powerful Magnolia was. Gratis arrives, a ship pulls near, and as he walks across the Lethe onto it, she asks him who he was, and he says, no one. She watches him drink a bowl offered by the figure in white until he becomes a new type of spirit. The wake of the boat leaves and pushes Alice to shore. Her pentagram scar sizzles away. She's first thrilled, then panicked that she might forget Peter. She feels more of her memories begin to pull away until she's dragged away from the river by Elpis and Archimedes. Chapter 33, she wakes up on Elpis' boat, and Elpis asks her why the Lethe didn't affect her, then asks if Grimes made her scar. She asks if Alice still has memories, and Alice realizes she has the same presence and gaps in her mind, presences and gaps in her mind that everyone does now. Elpis makes dinner and apologizes for leaving Alice and Peter alone. When Alice wakes up the next day, Elpis admits she found a Dilithea before meeting Alice and Peter. She tells Alice the best use for it is to take it to the Lord Yama in exchange for a boon. She gives it to Alice and says she's tired of searching and wants to cross over the river right away. In 34, Alice follows a chain of linked souls to Yama's throne. He takes the shape of Yanlu Wang and speaks to her in Chinese. Alice offers the Dilithea to trade and explains that Elpis gave it to her. Lord Yama is glad. Elpis is now traversing the courts to cross over. When Alice tells Lord Yama that she initially came to Hell to find Grimes, he makes Grimes appear. Grimes immediately begins arguing with and mocking Lord Yama, who reminds him that he is there only at Alice's mercy. Grimes said he had been haunting Alice, leaving breadcrumbs for her to follow him to Hell. Grimes wants to stay and use the Dilithea to do anything. Alice no longer has the same goals as Grimes. She wants to go home. She asks if he cares that Peter is dead, and Grimes says his death opened new possibilities. Alice realizes Grimes is just a regular, cruel man. She explains she would have used Ericto's theory to revive him. He says it wouldn't have worked. And Alice retorts that it already did. Nick, Kripke. Grimes begin to be scared. And Lord Yama nods his assent, and Alice begins to draw Peter's organic exchange spell around Grimes. Grimes tries to leave, but Lord Yama holds him inside. Alice finishes the pentagram, and a wind whips until it tears his essence apart. Peter walks through the door and appears where Grimes vanished. That was a pretty good scene, too. Chapter 35, Alice and Peter rush into each other's arms. Peter confirms that he did die. Alice feels more joy than she's ever had. She apologizes to Peter, and he apologizes to her. And she asks Lord Yama to exchange the Dilithia for a journey to the surface and their full lifespans back. He gives them only half of their forfeited lifespans back, and they go back to the real world. A staircase appears before Alice and Peter. Lord Yama tells them to ascend. They ascend high enough to see the quartz, and Alice reflects on her experiences as she takes a last look. Alice knows that the academy no longer matters because she had Peter, and they have a future with each other filled with potential. They reach a door framed with butterflies. Alice gives her last thanks to Elpis. They climb through the courtyard in the Magdalene College. Alice is newly appreciative of all the material things in the world. She doesn't know why she deserves life, but she knows not to question it. Together they climb into the court.
There was a line you said a minute ago. Backtrack like a paragraph and give it to me again. There was something I wanted to comment on.
Alice knows the academy no longer matters because she has Peter and they have a future with each other.
Potential. Okay.
Filled with potential.
So you just read a line there a moment ago that said filled with potential, and as someone who's dated potential, I strongly encourage not doing that, Alice, but you do you, girl. So
well,
live your best life.
Potential implies what it means, right? That there is something to look forward to because this has the ability to turn into something worthwhile or good. If we're referring back to you're traversing the plains of Australia, I don't think that had potential.
The belief in one's mind can prove that something has potential to oneself. Not prove, can justify that something has potential. Yeah. But that's not the only one. There's more. And every time, I don't recommend it.
Nope. But that's it. That's Katabasis. Or Katabasis. Or whatever you want to call it.
Katabasis.
Yeah.
What's, No, I was going to do something. That's kielbasa for you.
That's the Polish version.
Yeah, the Polish version. I like that. So we've already rated a book. We said as we were kind of dialoguing about this and talking about it, a 7, 6.5-ish right there.
Yeah.
We're understanding the author a little more, we think. We're understanding the story a little bit better. In terms of like first read executions, still like started high, went low, almost going on a journey of itself, where it's like starts up here, goes down. Actually, it's not. It's not as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah. Same. Overall, a good read. And I think what kept me through it all is the concept itself. I just found absolutely fascinating.
So, did you guys read it? Did you enjoy it? What stood out to you? Are you on the good critique or the bad critique? Next episode, you will enjoy with us the dialogue and dissecting with both Jess and Abby. And I kind of love the throwback here of like Elsbeth as a name, and it's the spirit of hope, and it's related to the mythos of Pandora's box, and Abby was on for that. Like, it just feels full circle to me. You can call it serendipity, you can call it whatever. You can call it a pentagram. I don't know. But Abby's going to go to hell with us, as is Jess.
Yep. I'll bring the Coke. Chalk. I'll bring the chalk.
I'll bring the chalk. Yes, of course. That's it. That's it, folks. Get the hell out of here. Or don't, because We'll see you in hell next time.